This is the story of how in just 10 days, OpenAI went from being close to its biggest acquisition in history and being able to truly compete in the AI coding arena, to being beaten by Elon Musk and Grok's new large language model, losing most of its AI researchers, and watching the company it tried to acquire get bought out by Google instead, in what has been coined the biggest hackquisition in history. To see how we got here, let's go back just a few weeks. This is In the Loop with Jack Horton. I hope you enjoy the show. So this started in May 2025 when Sam Altman and OpenAI made what appeared to be potentially quite a clever and ambitious acquisition of Windsurf AI, which is a coding platform. This would have been the largest OpenAI acquisition to date at about $3 billion, so a huge sum of money. Many people called it overpriced, many people called it clever, but now we never really get to see whether that bet paid off. Now, it's really important not to forget how important the AI coding industry is to these big players, because it's one of the most successful areas of the world where AI has been adopted, and people are paying huge sums of money for it. And competition over the last 12 months has become crazy. So Cursor just raised about $900 million at a $10 billion valuation. And Anthropic has been positioning Claude 4 as basically the best coding tool in the world. And they have literally been adopted by every major coding platform like Lovable, Cursor, Replit as the base underlying large language model. And so for OpenAI, the acquisition made quite a lot of sense. First, it would obviously bring agent-based coding directly into their platform by integrating much of the Windsurf technology into the ChatGPT technology. Apparently Windsurf had won a lot of major enterprise customers, Dell, JP Morgan, and they had about $40 million in ARR, so annualized recurring revenue. And the company had raised over $200 million and reached about a $1.25 billion valuation in just 2024 alone. So again, it made some sense to acquire and build this into their product. Second, it would close what has been described by many as a big feature gap from the likes of OpenAI, because startups like Windsurf and rivals like Cursor were offering developers much better experiences on their product. Again, don't forget how important it is to have the developer community using your technology and large language models to build AI applications. Third, it was what could be described as quite a defensive play as well, because it prevented competitors like Google or others acquiring the technology and trying to do the exact same. So this is when things went south. Under OpenAI's existing partnership with Microsoft, as you may know, Microsoft own about 49% of the company and are one of its main funders. Well, under that agreement, all the rights to OpenAI's technology goes to Microsoft. So Microsoft is allowed to use any of the OpenAI technology developed, which would have also meant any acquisitions they made, meaning Microsoft would automatically get access to all of Windsurf's proprietary technology. Something that the founders of Windsurf, as you can imagine, were vehemently against. Because from Windsurf's perspective, Microsoft was an existential threat. Their product, GitHub Copilot, was quite literally one of their number one competitors. So being acquired by a big company without any IP protection rights was a big no-no for the founders. And from Microsoft's perspective, how could they let one of their partners buy a company that would take away its main coding product? Or could take away its main coding product, because GitHub Copilot is $10 a user and they've got millions of users. Now, according to many reports, OpenAI did attempt to negotiate a carve-out that would basically exempt Windsurf's IP from any of these agreements. But Microsoft completely refused that idea. Kind of came at a bad time for OpenAI, because Microsoft and OpenAI are in the midst of a new partnership agreement on what the future of their partnership looks like. And any budge from Microsoft in those negotiations could mean further budges in other deal terms. So again, OpenAI and Microsoft weren't budging, because from Microsoft's perspective, the stance made sense. They don't want to give away potential. Now, a lot of this has got quite tense, as you can imagine, because according to Axios, OpenAI even were considering what's described as a nuclear option, which is accusing Microsoft of antitrust violations as part of their broader agreement that was happening, as I said, at the same time. Again, the antitrust part being you are threatening our business success in favor of yours. So the Windsurf situation got a lot worse in June because Anthropic then decided to cut off access to Windsurf's usage of its coding model. Again, Anthropic, who is part owned by the likes of Google and Amazon. And again, don't forget that the Claude models were by a mile developers' favorite model to use. All because Anthropic said if they were going to become part of the OpenAI ecosystem, then all access to their models were turned off. So here's the next part in that big story, which is, I guess, the entrance of Google. Because OpenAI's exclusive negotiation window ended in July 2025, and the deal officially collapsed. And within days of that happening, Google DeepMind basically has executed what's been described as one of the biggest hackquisitions in history by essentially, instead of purchasing Windsurf, acquiring their technology through a licensing agreement and hiring all of Windsurf's team and bringing them into the fold of DeepMind, so Google's AI lab. And Google announced that it had hired the CEO of Windsurf, as well as several top engineers, to come directly into the DeepMind team and lead their AI coding division within the Gemini, so language model Gemini's department. Now, this is super clever by Google. Rather than acquiring it for, say, $3 billion, like OpenAI had negotiated, Google paid about $2.4 billion for what's called a non-exclusive license to Windsurf's technology, which basically means that other people can use the technology, but they have a license to it. And this covered a multi-year compensation for all the staff that they hired. And the reason this is so clever is because by not taking an equity stake in the platform Windsurf itself, they essentially enabled Windsurf to remain independent, keep innovating, but from Google's perspective, avoided any regulatory scrutiny. Because every time a big tech giant pays $3 billion for another product, they typically then get investigated. Now, if this wasn't bad enough for the likes of OpenAI, who'd have made a huge bet, like spending $3 billion on a big company isn't just this small decision that happens in a few weeks. It's a very long process. And to make matters worse, over the last 10 days, OpenAI had a series of unfortunate events happen in the world. Because if that hadn't really annoyed Sam Altman enough, Elon Musk then launched their xAI's latest Grok model. Now, you may have seen this all over the news. I nearly did this entire episode on that single model release, but I thought it'd be interesting to wrap it into this discussion too. Because Elon Musk's xAI, just 2 days before this announcement of the Windsurf situation, launched what's called Grok 4, which is a model that has surpassed even GPT, so OpenAI's best models, across a number of the most respected benchmarks and even independent benchmarks. And now, arguably and technically, it is the best large language model in the world, which to me is just hilarious and it's madness. You know, it posted best-in-class scores across coding, reasoning, math, almost everything apart from things like speed and cost, in which it is more expensive and slower in terms of its responses than other models. And independent evaluators confirmed that xAI's claims were justified because the benchmarking project Artificial Analysis reported that its overall model performance surpassed both Gemini 2.5 and all of OpenAI's best offerings. And obviously, as you can imagine, Elon Musk wasn't modest about the achievements. As he said, it's the smartest AI in the world, and basically he's the best and the greatest, of course. But he actually credited Grok's performance with what's called a tool-integrated reasoning, so the ability to use tools and do reasoning, much like the OpenAI models, to be honest. But actually, one of the biggest training runs, so 2.4 trillion parameter scale training data and training runs for that incredible frontier performance. And the fact that OpenAI don't really have a response, there's a lot of noise and complaints about the fact that GPT-5 still isn't out, and there's not much news about it, and apparently OpenAI haven't spent 18 months trying to get this right, and hundreds of $1 million on at least 2 training runs for GPT-5 to only find the results underwhelming. Again, it's just more bad news for OpenAI. Now, obviously, these two things are very annoying for the likes of Sam Altman and OpenAI. But to make matters worse, And yes, it does get worse. In just the span of 20, 30 days, Meta, so Zuckerberg, has poached over 20 senior OpenAI researchers in what can only be described as probably the most aggressive talent heist ever. So at the end of June, on June 26th, the Wall Street Journal reported that Meta had snapped up OpenAI's vision researchers, so those researchers that were a key part of making language models understand things in the world, the people behind much of the voice work, also the image pipeline, and even the O3 model creators as well. And Zuckerberg has called this the Super Intelligence Lab. Now, Sam Altman told Reuters that Meta was offering a signing up package of up to $100 million for attracting these Meta researchers. And yes, you heard that right, $100 million signing on bonus. And arguably the real draw outside of the $100 million, which is a big draw, is the promise of basically unlimited resources, access to the very best training hardware for AI models, plus unlimited freedom from any corporate constraints. This is basically a team that can do whatever they want. They don't have to worry about consumer products and revenue. They've just been tasked with building a model that beats everything in the world, open source weights, and move really fast. So again, no consumer roadmap to build for, no Microsoft vetoing power that drives the researchers up the wall, no budget committees to convince, just pure research backed by unlimited compute, which to researchers trying to create AGI and incredible things must be incredibly attractive. So what does this all really mean? Well, the talent exodus probably couldn't have come at a worse time for OpenAI. They've just lost a load of their best researchers who were the architects of OpenAI's most important products over the last few years. The narrative damage to OpenAI after Google snatched up Windsurf is incredibly negative. And just a failure to acquire this company because of Microsoft only probably shines a light on future conflicts and tensions with the Microsoft OpenAI partnership. And for the first time ever since ChatGPT's launched, OpenAI looks more vulnerable, not just to, I guess, specific competitive threats, but to a fundamental erosion of its competitive advantages. Having the best models, the best researchers, the best people. It still, however, has the most users. But again, things like that can change really quick. Anyway, that's my deep dive into the OpenAI saga, and I hope that was interesting. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.